Prepare to be shocked and disturbed as we delve into one of the most harrowing and heartbreaking stories of human suffering and cruelty. We bring you the shocking truth about Japan's comfort women, a group of innocent young girls and women who were forced into sexual slavery during World War II, and how the Japanese government-sanctioned violation of these women was kept secret and denied for decades. The stories of these women are almost too terrible to comprehend. They were subjected to unimaginable horrors, and the scars of their trauma have lasted for generations. In this video, we will expose the horrific reality of what happened to the comfort women and its devastating impact on their lives and families. Join us as we shine a light on one of the most shocking and shameful chapters in human history and honor the bravery of those who have come forward to share their stories and seek justice. During the 1930s, governments actively sought solutions to economic decline and social unrest. Japan was no exception. By 1931, the country was well on its way to establishing its dominion in Asia, starting with the invasion of Manchuria. In the years preceding World War II, the Japanese Imperial Army sought to provide the finest possible conditions for its predominantly male army, including free sexual services. In contrast to the practice of geisha escorts, so-called comfort women were employed solely for sexual relations. Initially, these women were selected from the ranks of legal prostitutes in Japan. However, when the demand for women exceeded the supply, Japan started running out of bona fide escorts for their comfort houses. Since the beginning of the 20th century, the Japanese government had commandeered local brothels for the exclusive use of the military and placed physicians in the new comfort houses to combat disease. Older comfort houses, also known as comfort stations, included pay-to-play options, but the new locations were where troops could procure sexual services, often against the women's will. The Japanese government intended to prevent atrocities, such as the rape of Nanking, by confining rape and sexual abuse to military-controlled facilities and preventing news of such incidents from reaching the international press. The government also wished to reduce the cost of treating venereal diseases contracted by soldiers due to widespread and frequent rape, which hampered Japan's military ability. Nevertheless, despite the goal of reducing sexual abuse and venereal disease, the comfort stations exacerbated rape and facilitated the spread of venereal diseases. Comfort stations were so common, the Imperial Army taught accounting classes on how to manage comfort women's stations. One of the topics covered in these classes was figuring out the actuarial durability or perishability of the women procured. Once Japan had gained a stronghold on Asia and the Pacific, the amount of comfort stations increased substantially and is arguably the most comprehensive case of human sex trafficking the world has ever seen. Due to the massive demand, the Japanese government began luring and enslaving women from across Asia and the Pacific Rim to satisfy the requirements of its troops. Most of the women were from occupied countries such as Korea, China, the Philippines, Burma, Thailand, French Indochina, Malaya, Manchukuo, Taiwan, the Dutch East Indies, Portuguese Timor, Papua New Guinea, and other Japanese-occupied regions. Japan, China, the Philippines, Indonesia, Malaya, Thailand, Burma, New Guinea, Hong Kong, Macau, and French Indochina all kept comfort stations. A smaller number of women of European descent from the Netherlands and Australia were also involved, with an estimated 200 to 400 Dutch women and an undetermined number of other European women. Establishing comfort stations throughout Asia allowed personnel to obtain secure, on-demand enjoyment. However, not all soldiers were stationed close to a comfort station. And when they marched across vast stretches of land, comfort women were sometimes taken along. Special platoons of mobile comfort women were ushered into compounds to await the arrival of the returning soldiers. One physician said, "The barracks had one large common room, which we split up into 50 smaller rooms with antechambers. Large wooden beds were brought in, bedding was prepared, and every detail was carefully arranged." Historians assert that in July of 1941, in preparation for conflict with the Soviet Union, an estimated 10,000 Korean women were brought to Manchukuo to serve as comfort women for the Kwantung Army, and large numbers of brothels were set up throughout the area. Comfort was a euphemism for sexual relations, and the phrase comfort woman implied that the women took part voluntarily. They were anything but. What these women went through was repeated sexual abuse for years on end. Be warned that what you're about to see and hear is disturbing and explicitly shocking. Some of the comfort women were so active that they had no time to sleep. One comfort woman reported being assaulted daily by an average of 30 to 40 men. Another woman claimed she had relations with 10 to 20 men per day and was always raw. A Korean comfort woman recalled the following in a 1996 UN report. One Korean girl caught a venereal disease from being raped so often, and, as a result, over 50 Japanese soldiers were infected. In order to stop the disease from spreading and to sterilize the Korean girl, they stuck a hot iron bar in her private parts. The same woman recalled being a member of a contingent of 400 women who were expected to serve at least 5,000 Japanese soldiers daily. When a second girl questioned the excessive quota, Japanese commanders struck her with a sword. When it came to comfort women, age wasn't an issue for the Japanese soldiers of the time. In order to be sent out of Japan, a comfort woman was supposed to be at least 21 years old, though this was not always the case. The practice of ferrying minors overseas for sexual services became widespread. A former comfort woman, Lee Ok-seon, was 14 years old when she was thrown into a car and taken to a comfort station. Chong Ok-sun, another former comfort woman, shared a similar experience. One day in June, at the age of 13, I had to prepare lunch for my parents, who were working in the field, and so I went to the village well to fetch water. A Japanese garrison soldier surprised me there and took me away, so that my parents never knew what had happened to their daughter. I was taken to the police station in a truck, where I was assaulted by several policemen. A pastor who visited a comfort house in Shanghai described the scene. Women ranging from teenagers to 30-year-olds, laying on the floor naked, speaking different dialects, and waiting to be chosen by one of the Japanese men walking through the room. If they resisted, the guards beat them. The Japanese military valued virgins, at least when they first entered a comfort home. However, as the demand for virgins increased, more and more women were recruited, conned, and forced into servitude. Virgins were ideal because they hadn't contracted any venereal diseases, but this soon changed when they were compelled to perform sexual labor. Officers were reportedly given preferential treatment when it came to virgins when the men visited a comfort home. After an officer was finished with a virgin, she became available for the other soldiers to use. In large part, Japanese military men paid more when they had to for Japanese women due to the long-held belief that Koreans were inferior to Japanese. Nonetheless, Korean virgins were viewed as gifts for imperial warriors. Kim Hak-sun, a Korean woman, told her story in a 1991 interview about how she was conscripted into the Comfort Women Corps in 1941. When I was 17 years old, the Japanese soldiers came along in a truck, beat us, and then dragged us into the back. I was told if I were drafted, I could earn lots of money in a textile factory. The first day I was raped, and the rapes never stopped. I was born a woman, but never lived as a woman. I feel sick when I come close to a man. Not just Japanese men, but all men. Even my own husband, who saved me from the brothel. I shiver whenever I see a Japanese flag. Why should I feel ashamed? I don't have to feel ashamed. Kim reported that during her tenure as a comfort woman, she was assaulted 30 to 40 times daily, every day of the year. Military physicians and medical personnel often violated women during medical examinations. As Aso Tetsuo, a doctor in the Japanese military, testified that the comfort women were viewed as female ammunition and public toilets, and literal objects to be used and abused, with some comfort women forced to donate blood to heal wounded soldiers. Although most comfort women were Asian, European women were not immune to this culture of systematic assault. Suki Falkenberg, a survivor of the Comfort Women program, related her horrifying experiences. Serial penetration by many men is not a mild form of torture. Just the tears at the vaginal opening feel like fire applied to a cut. Your genitals swell and bruise. Damage to the womb and other internal organs can also be tremendous. Being used as a public dumping ground by those men left me with deep shame that I still feel in the pit of my stomach. It's like a hard, heavy, sick feeling that never entirely goes away. They saw not just my completely helpless, naked body, but they heard me beg and cry. They reduced me to something low and disgusting that suffered miserably in front of them. Even years later, it has taken tremendous courage for me to put these words on the page. So deep is the cultural shame. As the Allies started to turn the tide in the Pacific War theatre, things only got worse for the comfort women. Since comfort women were required to travel to the campaigns with the Japanese Imperial Army, many comfort women were killed when Allied forces overran Japan's Pacific defense and destroyed Japanese camps. When fleeing losing conflicts with the Allies, the Japanese military occasionally executed Korean comfort women. During the final stand of Japanese forces in 1944 to 1945, comfort women were often compelled to commit suicide. During the Battle of Saipan, comfort women were among those who committed suicide by jumping off the cliffs of Saipan. The Japanese government had told the Japanese colonists on Saipan that the American White Devils were cannibals, so the Japanese population preferred suicide rather than falling into the hands of these White Devils. British soldiers fighting in Burma frequently reported that the Korean comfort women they captured were shocked to discover that they would not be eaten. Ironically, starving Japanese troops cut off on remote Pacific islands or trapped in the jungles of Burma resorted to cannibalism, and comfort women were killed to supply protein for the Imperial Japanese Army in at least several instances. During the 7 years from 1938 to 1945, the number of comfort women in Japanese-occupied territory ranged from 360,001 to 410,000, with approximately 200,000 Chinese constituting the largest group. The lack of official documentation makes estimating the total number of comfort women difficult. Only in the 1990s did comfort women begin to speak out about their experiences. The Asian Women's Fund was set up in 1995 to apologize to and aid former comfort women. In 2015, Japan and South Korea reached an agreement for Japan to support the remaining 46 comfort women in Asia for $8.3 million. However, South Koreans criticized the deal, claiming it did not go far enough regarding reparations or public acknowledgement of Japan's wartime misconduct. A comfort woman statue was erected in Busan, South Korea, in December 2016. This promptly escalated political tensions between South Korea and Japan, as Japan viewed this as a violation of the 2015 agreement. In 2018, Japan rejected South Korea's requests to agree to additional measures in admitting to the atrocities and further reparations. According to the New York Times, the issue of sexual servitude remains the deepest long-standing wound between the two countries, with critics on each side accusing the other of twisting or whitewashing history. In November 2018, fewer than 30 surviving former comfort women were alive.